Today on CityCast Boise, 32 Idaho delegates are attending the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee this week. Many of them are supporters of the far-right state GOP leadership. So I'm checking in with a longtime Republican leader about the deep rifts in the local party, which were clearly visible at their convention earlier this summer. From stricter abortion bans to cutting higher education funding, we'll hear why he says the Idaho GOP has taken a dangerous turn and how he's trying to fight back. It's Monday, July 15th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Joining us today is Tom Luna, former state superintendent, former chairman of the state GOP party, and founder of the Gem State Conservatives. Thank you for joining us, Tom.
You bet, Lindsay. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I want to jump right in because there is a lot to talk about with this state convention. It did happen a couple of weeks ago, but the national convention starts today.
Yeah.
So Dorothy Moon was reelected as the chairwoman for her second two-year term. What kind of an impact is that going to have on the Idaho GOP?
Well, I think that's yet to be determined, but, you can go by the previous 2 years. Some of the changes that have been made to the Idaho Republican Party platform, the changes that have been made to rules that kind of govern how we run the affairs of the party. I think you can expect to see more of the same. The reason we started, I say we, Trent Clark and myself and a couple others, the reason we started this whole conversation in the first place was we were concerned about the direction that the state party is going. And, we made that clear. We decided that we needed to engage. And that's when we formed Gem State Conservatives. And the real focus of Gem State Conservatives was to engage those people that ultimately make those decisions at the party level, and those are precinct committee persons.
What are some of the things that you feel maybe aren't representative or directionally aren't in line with maybe your values or conservative values or where the party used to be?
Yeah. Well, just to be clear, I'm a conservative Republican and have been since the first time I was able to vote for president was for Ronald Reagan. And from that moment on, I was a dyed-in-the-wool conservative Republican, and I'm still a Ronald Reagan Republican. One of the things that precinct committee people do is they select a group from their county to go to the state party convention. And there they have they cast the votes to elect leadership. They're the ones who write the platform. They're the ones who pass the rules that will govern us going forward. So remember that back in 2022, just 2 years ago, Brad Little won the contested Republican primary for governor. 3 weeks later, delegates then went to the state convention. And what a precinct committee person is supposed to do is they're supposed to represent the views and of the constituents they have in their neighborhood. So I'll use Bonneville County as an example. In Bonneville County, Brad Little won every precinct.
Okay. Every
precinct. Yet the delegates that they sent to the state party convention, not one of them was a Brad Little supporter. So when you have the voters of Bonneville County overwhelmingly voting for Brad Little, but then the precinct committee people send delegates and none of them are supporters of Brad Little, you see where the disconnect is. Then pretty soon the party is going in a different direction than the majority of the Republicans are wanting them to.
And that's something I definitely wanted to touch on because Dorothy Moon won 62% of the delegate vote at the convention. Do you feel like that is representative of the level of support she has with Republicans around Idaho?
She won a majority of the people that were at the convention, but remember that there's hundreds, right, that are supposed to be representing hundreds of thousands of Republicans. And if they have their own agenda and they have their own goals and objectives, and it's not aligned with the majority of the Republicans, then you end up with leadership that is out of touch with the majority of Republicans. And then you end up with a platform and you end up with policies and rules that are out of touch with the Republicans. And we saw that play out in this last election also.
Yeah.
So you know then where the majority of the Republican Party is. It's more in line with a Brad Little and Scott Betke than it is with a Janice McGeehan or Dorothy Moon, right? But then just weeks later, you have this effort to try to take over the party leadership. What I'm convinced is on that election night 2 years ago, the extremists realize that they cannot win Republican primaries unless they can control who's on the ballot. They cannot win if there's a Brad Little on the ballot. So they decided then to take over the party, rewrite the rules, and actually give the party the ability to decide who can and cannot run as a Republican. That's part of the extremist efforts that have taken the party in a direction that is dangerous.
Well, and that's something we saw play out this last legislative session where several Republican legislators were censured by the party or at the county level for votes that they took, or the party or the county leadership said that they weren't in line with Republican values. Is that having a chilling effect on Republicans in the state?
I would say yes, but I think that it's kind of lost some of the chilling effect for this reason. I'll use Bonneville County as an example again, and this small group of Republicans that are going to decide if you're Republican enough. So basically, you're telling the voters of Bonneville that you elected this person, but we think you made a mistake. And so we're not going to allow them to be on the ballot again so you can vote for them again. Okay, so that happened. Numerous Republican legislators were called before these committees. And then we came to the primary. And in that primary, when the Republican voters had a chance to have their say, the people that had been called in front of this small group and said, we don't think you're Republican enough, they were reelected with over 60% of the vote. Those precinct committee people that called these people on the carpet and said, we want you to answer to us, they were defeated.
Interesting.
Right. So we saw when the voters had the opportunity to weigh what was going on, they defeated the precinct committee people that thought that they had the authority to decide who could be on the ballot.
And I definitely want to get into the exact impact this has had, or things that people might have seen in the news. But while I have you here, I do want to ask: do you feel this was your first, primary cycle with Gem State conservatives and with, getting delegates or getting precinct committeemen and things like that? Do you feel like your efforts were successful?
Sure, because we made gains, and I think some of us, even myself, was hoping we would see it play out at the state convention, right?
Yeah.
But that didn't go. I think everybody knew this was going to take more than one election cycle in order to take the party back. It took many election cycles for us to get in the predicament we are, but we made such great progress with the precinct committee people. But that just did not. It didn't result in the number of delegates that we should have gotten based on the amount of precinct committee races we won.
Okay, Tom, let's get into the convention itself, because there was a lot was going on in this convention. One of the first things I want to talk about is that there were armed security guards that were patrolling the Coeur d'Alene Resort that forced Idaho journalists to stay in a designated waiting area and prevented access from the sessions at the GOP convention. Like, they couldn't go to committee meetings or even the general session. And I definitely feel like this impacted the amount and type of media coverage that the convention got. Was limiting journalist access an example of maybe the lack of transparency we can expect from the current state GOP leadership?
So the way you phrase your question, unfortunately, I have to say yes. I think that's how you can anticipate that they will move going forward. That lack of transparency was on full display at the state convention. And, I'll be careful how I say this. I'm not a big fan of the press myself. I mean, I know what they're capable of doing when they have an agenda. If when I was a superintendent of public instruction, had a very pro reform agenda that just didn't sit right with a number of reporters, and I could just tell, right? But that's not a reason. In fact, it's exactly the reason we should not have any kind of censoring, right? You have that open press and that open dialogue. Voters are smart enough to figure out what's true and what's not true, but that level of security that was there, and then also, the way that the press was strong armed, a lot of us were not happy with that. And again, it taints all of us when we see that happen, and in a very public and bold way.
Yeah, I definitely feel like whether you agree with coverage or not, having more coverage, having more perspectives and more information is always more beneficial for the public and voters to be informed than less coverage or
Yeah.
heavily moderated coverage.
Yeah, for example, it would have been nice if the press was in the credentials committee when they refused to hear any of our comments and thoughts about delegate selection in a number of counties where we thought there were questions that need to be answered, and it wasn't even entertained. But then in the same credentials committee, they removed a couple dozen of our delegates. Right, they just said you can't vote, and they gave their reason. So it would have been nice to have the press in there to report and observe those things. And also, we should not be afraid of letting the press report on the conversations we're having, and how we come to the decisions that we make as a party.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say that's an American value is freedom of the press, open meeting laws. These are Idaho values that we do try to uphold. So I just think that was a very interesting and maybe revelatory choice.
Yeah, because I will tell you, 2 years before, when I was party chair, and all years before that, there was never any censoring of the press or not allowing them, and so it was unexpected. But what you described is how the press was treated, and by armed guards, heavily armed guards. It was rather bizarre.
I definitely want to get into now some of the changes to the Republican Party platform, because this can have a big impact on the party and our legislature. So really on the state as a whole. But delegates voted to expand the anti-abortion right to life plank to include the destruction of embryos, a practice connected to in vitro fertilization. And they voted in opposition to rape and incest exceptions in Idaho's abortion laws. Is this maybe an indication of potential bills or potential direction we could see this next legislative session?
I don't think they'd be able to get a bill like that passed, but that's what resolutions in a platform is supposed to do. It's supposed to set what the expectations and first, what a party as a whole believes in, and then it is a model for what future legislation should look like. Our platform in the past made it very clear that we were a very pro-life. It also made it clear that we understand that we accept that there should be exceptions for rape, incest, and the health and life of the mother. Our platform now says all abortion is murder. So anything after conception is murder, and it even goes as far as saying it should be prosecuted as a crime.
Yeah, that's full disclosure, I'm pro-choice, so we may not see eye to eye on that topic, but it kind of seems like an empathy or a humanity thing to have. At least, even if we don't agree on all aspects of it, exceptions for things like rape and incest.
Well, yeah. So I was party chair when they started having these conversations. And when they came to me and said they wanted to make this change, one of the first things I said was, abortion is a medical term. It's not
Yeah.
just, they're not all voluntary, right? And sometimes it's just an act of nature, but medically it's referred to as an abortion, and they could not agree to even making an exclusion for the life of the mother, and so my question then was, so if you're pro-life, you're willing to lose two lives, right? That's basically what you're saying, and that doesn't sound very pro-life to me, and that I can't accept that. And I do believe that there should be exceptions for rape and incest, and then the health and life of the mother, right? And so, and I think I'm confident that's where a majority of the Republicans are. I think you're going to see a Republican platform come out of the National Republican Committee that's going to be similar to what I've said, and it's going to be in conflict with what the Idaho Republican Party platform says. And so now, who's the real rhino?
Yeah, that'll definitely be interesting then for Republicans to point to who they're
Yeah,
aligning themselves with or what they're aligning themselves with. But I do know people are very concerned, especially with language about destruction of embryos.
yeah,
A lot of people use in vitro fertilization and
yeah.
are trying to utilize that to have a family. And other states have outlawed that. So I know that there is some skittishness in Idaho with our abortion bans and now this Republican Party platform that could happen in Idaho.
It's interesting what's happened since Roe versus Wade was overturned, because I think it was easier. I want to make sure I say this correctly. I don't think anybody thought Roe versus Wade was going to be overturned anytime soon. So you had people on the right and the left that would take many positions on it, assuming it was never going to change anytime soon. When it did change, then it forced a lot of people to really rethink. Just if you now you are going to be the one that's going to pass the law in your state, it became far more important. I think people did a lot more homework, a lot more thought went into it, and I think you're seeing that play out right now. But in Idaho, back to your point, our platform has been changed when it comes to abortion, to a platform stance that a very, very small percentage of Idahoans, let alone Republicans, would support.
I also want to talk about another successful new GOP plank that expresses opposition to, quote, using taxpayer funding for programs beyond high school. Now, people have speculated that this was aimed at maybe the Idaho Launch Workforce Training Grant Program, but other people have expressed concern that it could be interpreted as opposing all higher education funding. Is funding for higher education in Idaho at risk?
I think it is. I really do.
Yeah.
Here's the other catch: is using that language, a Republican legislator could go considerably further than just launch, right? You have GI bills, you have Pell grants. Those are at the federal level, but there's still tax dollars, and the language in that platform doesn't limit it to just state dollars.
No,
You,
it
you could
doesn't.
see a bill that would say, we won't accept any federal funds for our universities and colleges. We won't receive any federal funds for career tech opportunities after high school. It could go on and on. When you talk about education, we know that 60% of the jobs in America today require more than a high school diploma. They
Yeah.
don't all require a college degree, but a certificate or some kind of a training or internship. And to think that we wouldn't provide assistance and help to make those programs successful is just ludicrous. I definitely think we could do better with the money that we're spending in higher ed, right? There's no doubt. But to say that we wouldn't spend any is not the answer.
Well, and I kind of think that this potentially could have the same impact you talked about with the abortion platform and the stance taken where people will virtue signal or make statements or laws that they don't ever think could get passed because higher education has existed for so long. It's such an institution, but that when they are called to the carpet to vote a certain way, then we could lose these institutions, that
Yeah.
then we could have an impact where they didn't really necessarily think through the impact this will have on our state and the far-reaching implications.
Yeah, and what the state party leadership will do is they'll just say, this person isn't following the platform. If most people read the platform, they would be surprised all the different things that are in there that most people would scratch their heads and wonder, why is it even there? And then there's some of it that would alarm them.
Thank you so much for breaking this down for us and giving an insider perspective on what really went down in the convention.
Well, I hope it was helpful. And my hope is that we can return the Republican Party back to the party that we remember. If I could end with this, Ronald Reagan said that if somebody that agrees with me 80% of the time is my ally, they're not my enemy, right? And that's the Republican Party that we need. We need a big tent, understand that we don't agree on everything, but we agree on most things, and we can get a lot of good things done working together.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review. It helps other people find us. We'll be back tomorrow morning with your guide to local upcoming food festivals. See you then.